Section 7 of A Visit to the Holy Land. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Chapter 4 of A Visit to the Holy Land, Egypt and Italy, Part 1, by Ida L. Pfeiffer. On Sundays and holy days the sweet waters of Europe are much frequented. One generally crosses the Golden Horn, into which the sweet water runs in a caique. There is, however, another way thither, across the mountains. A large grass plat, surrounded by trees, is the goal towards which the heaving multitude pours. Here are to be seen people from all quarters of the globe, and of all shades of color, reclining in perfect harmony on carpets, mats, and pillows, and solacing themselves, pipe in mouth, with coffee and sweetmeats. Many pretty Jewesses, mostly unveiled, are to be seen among the crowd. On Friday, the holiday of the Turks, the scene in the Asiatic sweet waters is just as animated, and here there is much more to interest us Europeans, as the company consists chiefly of Turks, male and female. The latter have, as usual, their faces covered. The most beautiful feature, the flaming eye, is, however, visible. The trip across the sea to the Asiatic sweet waters is incomparably more beautiful and interesting than the journey to the European. We travel up the Bosphorus, in the direction of the Black Sea, past the splendid new palace of the Sultan. Though this palace is chiefly of wood, the pillars, staircases, and the ground floor, built of marble of dazzling whiteness, are strikingly beautiful. The great gates, of gilded cast iron, may be called masterpieces. They were purchased in England for the sum of £8,000. The roof of the palace is in the form of a terrace, and round this terrace runs a magnificent gallery, built only of wood, but artistically carved. We also pass the two ancient castles which command the approach to Constantinople, and then turn to the right towards the sweet waters. The situation of this place is most lovely. It lies in a beautiful valley surrounded by green hills. Very interesting also is an excursion to Chalcedonia, a peninsula in the Sea of Marmora on the Asiatic side, adjoining Scutari. We were rowed thither in a 2-oared caique in an hour and a quarter. The finest possible weather favored our trip. A number of dolphins gamboled around our boat. We saw these tame fishes darting to and fro in all directions, and leaping into the air. It is a peculiar circumstance with regard to these creatures, that they never swim separately, but always either in pairs or larger companies. The views which we enjoy during these trips are peculiarly lovely. Scutari lies close on our left. The foreground is occupied by mountains of moderate elevation, and above them, in the far distance, gleams the snow-clad summit of Olympus. The uninhabited Prince's Island and the 2 Dog Islands are not the most picturesque objects to be introduced in such a landscape. To make up for the disadvantage of their presence, we have, however, a good view of the Sea of Marmora, and can also distinguish the greater portion of the city of Constantinople. On Chalcedonia itself there is nothing to be seen but a lighthouse. Beautiful grass plats, with a few trees and a coffee-house, are the chief points of attraction with the townspeople. An excursion by sea to Baluklid is also to be recommended. You pass the entire Turkish fleet, which is very considerable, and see the largest ship in the world, the Mahmud, of 140 guns, built during the reign of the late Sultan Mahmud. Several 3-deckers of 120 guns, some of them unrigged, and many men of war mounting from 40 to 60 cannons, lie in the harbor. For an hour and a half we are riding through the Sea of Marmora, to the left of the great quay which surrounds the walls of Constantinople. Here, for the first time, we see the giant city in all of its magnificent proportions. We also pass the 7 towers, of which, however, only 5 remain standing. The other 2, I was told, had fallen in. If these towers really answer no other purpose than that of prisons for the European ambassadors during tumults or in the event of hostilities, I think the sooner the remaining 5 tumble down the better, for the European powers will certainly not brook such an insult from the Turks, now in the day of their decline. We disembark immediately beyond the Seven Towers, and walked for half an hour through long empty streets, then out at the town gate, where the cypress grove for a time conceals from our view a large open space, on which is built a pretty Greek church. I was told that during the holidays at Easter such riotous scenes were here enacted that broken heads were far from being a phenomena of rare occurrence. In the church there is a cold spring containing little fishes. A legend goes that on the high days at Easter these poor little creatures swim about half fried and yet alive, because once upon a time, when Constantinople was besieged, a general said that it was no more likely that the city should be taken than that fishes could swim about half fried. Ever since that period the wonderful miracle of the fried fish is said to occur annually at Easter. On our return to Archaik, we saw near the shore an enormous cuttlefish, more than 14 feet in length, which had just been taken and killed. A number of fishermen were trying with ropes and poles to drag the monster ashore. The walks in the immediate neighborhood of Pera are the Great and Little Campo, and somewhat farther distant the great bridge which unites Topana with Constantinople. The latter is a most amusing walk, during which we can view the life and bustle on both shores at the same time. In the Little Campo are two Frankish coffee houses, before which we sit quite in European fashion on handsome chairs and benches, listening to pleasant music and regaling ourselves with ices. During my residence in Constantinople I had the good fortune to be present at some very entertaining festivities. The most magnificent of these took place on the 23rd of April, the anniversary of Mahomet's death. On the eve of this feast we enjoyed a fairy-like spectacle. The tops of all the minarets were illuminated with hundreds of little lamps, and, as there are a great many of these slender spires, it can be readily imagined that this sea of light must have had a beautiful effect. The Turkish ships in the harbor presented a similar appearance. At every loophole a large lamp occupied the place of the muzzle of the cannon. At 9 o'clock in the evening salvos were fired from the ships, and, at the moment that the cannons were fired, the lamps vanished, flashes of light and gunpowder smoke filled the air. A few seconds afterward, as if by magic, the lamps had reappeared. This salute was repeated 3 times. The morning of the 23rd was ushered in by the booming of the cannon. All the Turkish ships had hoisted their flags, and garlands of colored paper were twined round the mast to their very tops. At 9 o'clock I proceeded in the company of several friends to Constantinople, to see the grand progress of the Sultan to the mosque. As with us, it is here the custom to post soldiers on either side of the way. The procession was headed by the officers and government officials, but after every couple of officers or statesmen followed their servants, generally to the number of 12 or 15 persons, in very variegated costumes, partly Turkish, partly European, and withal somewhat military, in fact a perfect motley. Then came the Emperor's state horses, splendid creatures, the majority of them of the true Arabian breed, decorated with saddle-cloths richly embroidered with gold, pearls, and precious stones, and proudly moving their plumed heads. Their spirited appearance and beautiful paces excited the admiration of all the learned in such matters. They were followed by a number of pages on foot. These pages are not, however, youths, as in other countries, but men of tried fidelity. In their midst rode the youthful Emperor, wrapped in his cape, and wearing in his fez cap a fine heron's plume, buckled with the largest diamond in Europe. As the Sultan passed by, he was greeted by the acclamations of the military, but not of the people. The soldiers closed the procession, but their bearing is not nearly so haughty as that of the horses. The reason of this is simple enough. No one dares look upon the Arabians with an evil eye, but the soldiers are entirely subject to the caprice of their officers. I would certainly rather be the Sultan's horse than his soldier. The uniforms of the officers, in their profusion of gold embroidery, resemble those of our hussars. The privates have very comfortable jackets and trousers of blue cloth with red trimmings. Some have jackets entirely of a red color. The artillerymen wear red facings. Their chaussure is pitiable in the extreme. Some have boots, not unfrequently decorated with spurs, others have shoes, trodden down at heel and terribly tattered, and some even appear in slippers. All are without stockings, and thus naked feet peer forth everywhere. The position of the men with regard to each other is just as irregular. A little dwarf may frequently be seen posted next to a giant, a boy of 12 or 14 years near a gray-headed veteran, and a negro standing next to a white man. At this feast a great concourse of people was assembled, and every window was crowded with muffled female heads. We had been advised not to be present at this ceremony, as it was stated to be of a purely religious nature, and it was feared we should be exposed to annoyance from the fanaticism of the Mussulman. I am glad to say, however, that the curiosity of my party was stronger than their apprehensions. We pushed through everywhere, and I had again occasion to feel assured that grievous wrong is frequently done the good Turks. Not only was there no appearance of a disposition to annoy us, but we even obtained very good places without much trouble. On their Easter days the Greeks have a feast in the great Campo. On all the 3 holidays, the hamaks, water carriers and porters, after the service is over, march in large numbers to the Campo with their songs and music, with noise and shouting, waving their handkerchiefs in the air. Arrived at their destination, they divide into different groups, and proceed to amuse themselves much after the manner of other nations. A number of tents are erected, where a great deal of cooking and baking is carried on. Large companies are sitting on the ground or on the tombstones, eating and drinking in quiet enjoyment. We see a number of swings laden with men and children. On this side we hear the squeaking of a bagpipe, on that the sound of a pipe and drum, uttering such dismal music that the hearer instinctively puts a finger into each ear. To this music a real bears' dancing is going on. 6 or 8 fellows stand in a half circle round the musician, and 2 leaders of these light-toed clodhoppers continually wave their handkerchiefs in the air, as they stamp slowly and heavily round in a circle. The women are allowed to appear at this feast, but may neither take part in the swinging nor in the dancing. They therefore keep up a brave skirmishing with the sweetmeats, coffee, and delicacies of all kinds. The more wealthy portion of the community employs these days in riding to Baluklid, to gaze and wonder at the miracle of the half-baked and yet living fishes. As the Greeks are not so good-natured as the Turks, the latter seldom take part in their festivities. Turkish women never appear on these occasions. On the 8th of May I saw a truly Turkish fete in the neighborhood of the Archmaiden, place of arrows. In a plain surrounded on all sides by hills, men of all nations formed a large but closely packed circle. Cavasses, gendarmes, were there to keep order among the people, and several officers sat among the circle to keep order among the cavasses. The spectacle began. 2 wrestlers or gladiators made their appearance, completely undressed, with the exception of trousers of strong leather. They had rubbed themselves all over with oil, so that their joints might be soft and supple, and also that their adversaries should not be able to obtain a firm hold when they grappled together. They made several obeisances to the spectators, began with minor feats of wrestling, and frequently stopped for a few moments in order to husband their strength. Then the battle began afresh, and became hotter and hotter, till at length one of the combatants was hailed as victor by the shouting mob. He is declared the conqueror who succeeds in throwing his opponent in such a manner that he can sit down upon him as on a horse. A combat of this kind usually lasts a quarter of an hour. The victor walks triumphantly round the circle to collect his reward. The unfortunate vanquished conceals himself among the spectators, scarcely daring to lift his eyes. These games last for several hours. As one pair of gladiators retire, they are replaced by another. Greek, Turkish, and Armenian women may only be spectators of these games from a distance. They therefore occupy the adjoining heights. For the rest, the arrangements are the same as at the Greek Easter feast. People eat, drink, and dance. No signs of beer, wine, or liquor are to be discovered, and consequently there is no drunkenness. The Turkish officers were here polite enough to surrender the best places to us strangers. I had many opportunities of noticing the character of the Mussulman, and found to my great delight that he is much better and more honest than prejudices generally allow us to believe. Even in matters of commerce and business it is better to have to do with a Turk than with a votary of any other creed, not even excepting my own. During my stay at Constantinople, from the 5th of April until May 17th, I found the weather just as changeable as in my own country. So much so, in fact, that the temperature frequently varied 12 or 14 degrees within 24 hours. Section 7.